Ron? Sure. We are all here today, and we do have a quorum of 3 members, and I hereby call the meeting to order. Before proceeding with the agenda, I want to make one note that our village manager, Tori Hall, this is her last meeting here. We wish her well in her future and thank her for her really reorganizing and putting a huge amount of effort into getting lots of new ventures going. Until we hire a new manager and call upon residents to go all out drumming whatever we drum to find new hires to do that. Let people know. We already have a number of applications that come in, but we're still looking. In the meantime, Beth Boa, who is sitting at the back desk, will be acting manager. She has been here for about 2 months now? 3 months. 3 months.
3 months.
And has really been filling in and involved in almost everything. So we're looking forward to her acting managership. With that, we do have a quorum here for tonight. We have a number of committee reports. It looks like we're going to be busy. But let's start with opportunity for residents to make any comments they wish. Please identify yourself. We do have a microphone up here. Any resident comments? We don't have any official weather reports.
I think everybody knows about that already. I don't think they need me to tell.
Okay,
2 words, stay home.
2 words, 2 feet.
2 feet. Okay.
Okay. 3.
Okay. And Steve, identify yourself, name and address.
Steve Charn from Raymond Street. Our conversation just triggered this. I don't know if most residents realize the listserv, which has really become kind of a quasi-official medium for communication. As you know, you've seen the traffic from earlier today or tomorrow or yesterday, with people expressing concerns about your policies, about your process, about the perceived lack of transparency, or about the availability of debate. What I didn't realize until today is that the listserv is actually moderated by Bill Levovich, who's a former council member. I think he quit the council in a fit of something or other earlier in the year. But he's actually has the ability to censor comments. And while this is not an official communication tool, Constant Contact is the official communication tool for the village, it has the effect of being an official tool. Committees use it, we all use it, everyone uses it. It's an effective way of communicating. That would the council not consider putting some rules or some understandings in place about how that listserv should be utilized and not censored, or censored maybe for vulgarity or offensive language or something to that effect. And in the absence of doing that, would you put the way you have the current listserv access on the website, would you place a competing listserv next to the existing one on the website so that other people could use and start a separate listserv that didn't have the same censorship from a single resident with a political agenda as a former council member?
Thanks for your comments. A little background on that. One of the reasons that we developed the Constant Contact from the village is that it was the official, because before it was unclear. It was used, the unofficial one was used for all sorts of purposes, private and public purposes. So the village communicates officially through our own village web system. But it is an interesting idea that we could have a kind of a chat portion on the village one. Again, it has to be moderated, but for a variety of things, as you mentioned. But it's something that I think perhaps we should think about.
Is that moderator role not someone maybe would be better filled by a staff member who's just simply enforcing rules that the council sets?
That's right, yeah. Another comment?
The question is,
please stand up, identify yourself.
I guess the question is, how does a moderator get chosen? And can we make.
Of which? Of the current?
Of the listserv.
Of the, it's like a private venture. If you want to set up a listserv, do it.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
But it is on the website, and it doesn't say, please find a link to a private listserv that is not regulated by the village. It says,
Steve,
apply here and you'll be.
the website was updated today to address the
No, I just
concern
checked
that you're raising, as well as the concerns of a few other residents.
Those of whom have been censored, right? I'd imagine.
Just questions were raised about, is the listserv an official, is the council going to respond via the listserv or what's going on? So we updated today. Tori and Beth were very fast to update the website to make it a little bit more clear that official communications come from the office or the council or the committee chairman via constant contact. You wouldn't be receiving official communications via the listserv.
But would the council, and maybe at the next meeting, consider acknowledging that it is effectively an official medium, and just simply having some outline rules and moving the moderation to a non-resident, or someone who's just a part of their scope of work, what they do every day.
So I think we can talk about that.
Yeah,
I would say
something.
ownership of this listserv is not something that we have any control over. So if there was going to be a listserv created and managed by the village, it would have to be done separately.
It's still on, so.
Thank you. I'm Marty Langwood of Chestnut Street. I think you all know me. And I have used the listserv over the years to raise substantive issues about PEPCO, about the budget, etc. And I just want to add my 2 cents on the censorship issue, because back in the middle of 2013, I believe it was June, I sent some public budget information, a very short 3-sentence, 4-sentence posting to the listserv, which was censored by Bill Leibowitz. Not only did he refuse to post it, but he threw me off the listserv. And suddenly my listserv access vanished with no explanation whatsoever. So there is some history here. And I am very concerned about the fact that voices are being silenced in what looks to me like a fairly systematic way. And that, to me, raises ethical issues. So I think it's very important that we have a conversational forum that is not censored by an individual private citizen who may have, as my buddy said, Steve, an agenda of his own. It was absolutely unconscionable to censor public budget information from a listserv discussion.
Good. Thank you.
Leanne Anderson, Quincy Street. I have to admit, I have not seen the update to the website, but I think one thing that would be helpful, if this hasn't been done, and I realize I'm speaking in a vacuum here, is to perhaps indicate not only is it not the official channel, but that it is a private listserv that is subject to moderation according to whatever private standards a private citizen running it might choose to impose, and that way and then council could consider some of the other ideas as well. But I think it's important that it be indicated that it is a private forum subject to private, I don't want to say whims, but private censorship by rightfully so, by the owners of that listserv.
Good, thank you. Any other? Well, let's see if there's anyone else. Okay.
Who owns this listserv, and how is the moderator chosen?
Sorry, go ahead.
Historically, it was started by another former council member before he was ever on the council. Josh Bowers. Sorry. All of a sudden, his name disappeared. And then Bill took it over. And before the village itself had its own active site, it was, in a sense, a semi-official site. Notices went out from the village, information came in, and so on. But we saw clearly there was this possibility of conflict. And the way I was thinking of it at the time is that it's like somebody who has their own village newspaper. They publish their editorials, the letters to the editor, it's theirs to do. They can push any policy they want. And talking to a lawyer who was a long history as a municipal lawyer about this, he said, you have no control, no authority over that. That's one way to think about it. And so that was one of the reasons that we established an official for official communications from the village itself. One more, yes. Identify. This is for, we have audio recordings, and for minutes, we'd like to know who's speaking. When you're just listening to the recording, it's awfully hard to know sometimes who's talking.
Makes perfect sense, Arthur. Yeah. This is Marty again. I think that one of the things we could do just to establish some checks and balances in the short term is to simply ask our current listserv moderator, Bill Leibowitz, to provide a list of the postings that he has decided to censor week by week, which would allow anyone of the council's decision to give some review function there and simply look and see. I, for one, would be happy to volunteer to look at whatever Bill rejected as being unpostworthy and to report to the council on that. So if you would like to have a volunteer back up here,
okay,
I'd be happy to look at the list of what he rejects.
So noted.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Mike.
Yes,
I
sir.
have one comment
Okay.
on the building, on the code.
So, yeah,
Do you want me to raise that?
We're going to have a
Now?
hearing.
Yeah.
We're having a second public hearing.
Well, why don't you be, if he may not be here later.
To comment on the election.
Yeah, Mike, why don't you stand up?
Mike Zielinski from Turner Lane. Couple of things. One is, and I have to go pick my daughter up at the airport, that's why maybe I should do this now instead of sticking around. And I apologize for not having done a more thorough review of this 2 or 3 months ago when I should have raised this issue. But I noted that in the code, the ordinance revision stuff, there is a reference to one of the purposes is to make it clear that we can have special counsel appointed. And then in section 4-202B is a provision dealing with when you have an ethics complaint. It provides that the ethics committee shall review the complaint with the village attorney or special counsel appointed by the village attorney. And it struck me as that the village attorney shouldn't be appointing special counsel. It has to be something that's got to be done by the council. And I think I just verified earlier that probably that person would have to have a contractual relationship with the village, which would have to be through the council and everything else. So I was just wondering whether that maybe could read, or maybe should read, special counsel appointed, maybe in consultation with the village attorney or something like that, so to make it's not the village attorney who's doing an appointment.
Right. Thank you.
Can it just be a special counsel appointed by the village, period?
Well, no, this is, Brad, why don't you address this? Because this...
Sure. That language was borrowed from the model ethics ordinance published by the Attorney General. And the underlining basis is if it is the village council that's being investigated, the investigator shouldn't be appointed by the council, should be appointed by the attorney. But Mike's correct. Ultimately, the council would be contracting for that work. So, I mean, it would be appropriate to add, perhaps, as Mike said, or stated another way, appointed by the village attorney with the consultation of the council, with the affirmance of the council.
Mike doesn't want the words appointed by the village attorney.
Yeah, well, the problem is how do you get arm's length distance here? What we got now in the present language is elbow length. I don't know how you go about getting the arm's length distance unless it were one of the elections or ethics committee were to take on that role.
We have an ethics committee chairman sitting right here. Mark, do you have any thoughts on this? Or?
Yeah. Do you want me to come up here?
Yeah, please.
I also have a thought on this sort of thing, but thanks. First of all,
this is Mark Efron.
I'm sorry, I'm Mark Efron, chair of the ethics committee. I think that was the 18th choice. But anyway, so we're happy to take a look at the language and see if we can clarify it. I think the point is a good point, and see if we can create a little bit more distance than might already be there. It may be an insolvable problem, I'm not sure, and have to go back and look at the code, the model code as well. But maybe we'll put that on our agenda of things to do.
Good. Thank you. So
I want to go back to the listserv thing just for a moment. I'm actually sort of horrified that there was this unofficial, I understand it, but sort of quasi, we all sort of accepted it as a means of communications. And I had no problem with somebody being a moderator to make sure that people were being civil and doing, things properly. But to find out that things were actually not posted that should have been posted, and there might be a political reason or not a political reason, I don't know, it actually sort of horrifies me. So I went and looked at the new webpage, and it makes it pretty clear, makes it entirely clear that it's not a voice of Martin's Editions, but I don't think it should be on the webpage. If it is going to be a separate communications vehicle, I don't think there should be an opportunity to sign up for it on the Martin's Editions webpage.
Well, if I could, I think there's a major confusion between Constant Contact and the listserv, and people think they're on one, or they think they're on both, or that it's the same thing, and so I feel like I understand exactly what you're saying, but if we don't call it out and say what it is, then I don't think it clears up the confusion. That's the problem.
Well, then I think there ought to be a communication to everybody that says the official communication is X, and then, and Mr. Leibovitz can write whatever he wants to about unofficial, whoever's going to moderate it, I don't want to focus on him, and remove it from the webpage, because right now, I understand your point, which is a good point, is people are confused, I'm confused, but it seems to me if it's not a fairly neutral thing being moderated by a neutral person, it should not appear on the webpage. It may take some extra communication to alert people to what it is and what it isn't, but that's just my 2 cents worth.
Okay, thank you. I think we've heard a lot of good comments. And one more on this, and that's from Mr. Zielinski.
Thing, or you want to wait for that?
What's that?
I have an observation on the elections.
Why don't you do it now? Because
This is
you have to go.
Okay, you gotta go. Mike Zielinski again. 2 things. One is I've read over the 602 amendments. I don't have any particular problems with any of them. One obvious thing that I may have to look at is, do you want to maybe modify Section 601 also? Because that provides the annual meeting, which I don't think can be changed because it's related to the budget and tax matters. It says it's going to be held between March 1st and 5/15, whereas now the election might be a little later. But one of the things that's included in the notice that has to go out about the annual meeting is the list of candidates. And you might not have a list of candidates by then. So maybe you just delete that from 601. There's one other issue that isn't addressed here, and it concerns Section 408 and 401. That's filling vacancies. I think this came up when Chris was on the council and left just before the election. If somebody resigns more than 4 months before an election, the council appoints somebody who serves the rest of the term.
Right.
Not the rest of the term, but up to the next election. The problem with that is that you can get, if depending on who it is that resigns or leaves or dies or whatever, creates the vacancy, you can then have basically 4 seats being appointed, or maybe it could be 5, conceivably 5.
Being appointed or being
elected?
Elected, yes.
So then 401 says all elections, people elected serve 2-year terms. So you could get into you're only having elections every 2 years of all 5 council members. I think there needs to be some, the 409 dealt with the transition thing, because you said 3 and 2, and then everybody was supposed to get staggered. But there may be, maybe we should look at what happens if somebody resigns closer than 4 months to the election, and then some mechanism for allocating terms so that we have staggered terms like we're supposed to have. That's all.
Election committee, you got that?
No, we have to take it because they're trying
And I apologize again for raising this. This is very late.
Thank you. Okay. Finally, any other? Okay. That brings us to the election committee report. We particularly want to thank the committee for the amount of work they put in. Something that should have been done 20 years ago that we were remiss in doing. And finally, having noted the absence of procedures and so on, you had to fill in the blanks for the last 20 years or so. So, Leanne, do you want to introduce your report?
And the committee here.
Yes.
And we have members of the committee.
Yes, in fact, we have the entire committee, I think. Yes, we do.
Ah, good.
Not by planning, which is interesting. Just sort of showed up.
I'm Leanne Anderson. I'm the chair of the election committee, Quincy Street, and we have Steve Troran. You know, I must pronounce your last name. You have to do it for me better.
That's Trower. My
Close
wife,
enough.
my wife doesn't pronounce it correctly. We've been married.
Naomi and Marty and Natalie, and so we're the Fierce Five at your election committee here. So we decided when we started this process that one of the things, given I think some of the experiences of the last election cycle that was of high value, and I really credit Marty, in fact, for being a driver of this on the committee, was that we wanted to have a very open and transparent process, and we wanted to make sure that residents had plenty of chances for input. And so we had, of course, invited public comment at all our meetings. We also asked for comment by email in the newsletter. We also did a survey monkey to which 28 residents responded, and took a look at all the suggestions that came in, and then formed our recommendations around that. And so the first thing that we noted was some changes that would be needed to Section 602. It sounds like we may have a bit more homework to do now, or at least you all have heard the suggestion that there is some additional homework to do to implement really the changes that we were imagining as a result of the public feedback that we got. So the changes that are in 602 are really intended to dovetail with the feedback that we got from the public. The first was the date of the election. I know it's just been raised, the issue concerning the linkage between the election day and the annual meeting, although they don't necessarily have to stay tied. But the idea was to not create the situation that could exist under the current charter of electing the new council on March 1, or the new council members on March 1, but not having them take a seat until July 1. So the idea was to hold the election closer in time to the time when the new council members would actually be taking their seat. The nominations, declaration of candidacy, and candidate statements, some of the changes that were made in 602 were really what I would call drafting changes. The code wasn't very clear on the difference between Marty hasn't thrown her hat in the ring, but I decided to nominate Marty, and lo and behold, she's a candidate, and me, myself, saying, hey, you should elect me. So we tried to clear that up and include in our procedures sufficient timeline so that folks who were nominated could respond to that and have time to prepare adequate statements in addition to the people who nominated themselves. So that was really in the nature of cleanup changes. What we tried to imagine was a process that was orderly and that would respond to the public comments that we received about candidate statements and getting more information about candidates. So we tried to create a timeline where that would make sense. We also did put in a deadline which was intended to make sure that we could fulfill our obligations as imagined under the procedures for getting information out to the public and publicizing the list of candidates. But of course, as we noted in our report, that does not cut off the ability for anyone to wage a write-in campaign or for there to be write-in. But we wanted to keep the process otherwise orderly. I understand in the past some people have come up very late in the game, very close to the election, and said, oh, all of a sudden I've decided I want to run. And so we tried to create a process with a little more order around it. In connection with the comments that we received, first of all, everyone felt very strongly about our lovely wooden box and the sidewalk celebration and the Thursday night, believe it or not. So that is something that will very much, under our recommendations, remain part of the spirit of this community. And the in-person voting as well. We did receive the comment and discussed in committee as well that the tension between the folks who work downtown, I'm one of them, who found the earlier hours made it very difficult to get here, and people with very young children, who maybe want to come by right before dinner and bedtime and the whole, bath routine. And so we have recommended that the council consider extending and making it a 3-hour voting window from 5 to 8 to accommodate those different types of families and residents here who might be trying to come from different places and dealing with competing concerns. one of the other things that came up very strongly was absentee ballots. People wanted absentee ballots. There was a little bit of, oh, well, if people, turn out not to be absent, why can't they just come and vote in person? Versus other people saying, well, if I've already gotten the ballot, what does it matter if they turn it in person? The actual survey results very much favored that if you got the ballot and your plans changed at the last minute, and as we all know happens now in this day and age that your plans can change on a dime, that you should be able to bring it and turn it in person. And so the procedures that we have put in place with control numbers and having the ballots come to the P.O. box or be submitted in a way that will keep them confidential will allow us to have control over those ballots, and will have us have security over them, but also keep the confidentiality from even ourselves, and also obviate the possibility that there would be any tampering by village staff or council members or whoever with those ballots. And so that was the reason why you see the control number feature so prominently in the procedures that we created. We also do intend to accept absentee ballots, assuming we can verify them, and that's again where that control number comes in, that this is actually a ballot that was sent out and was supposed to go, if it went to Sally but Fred 3 houses over is trying to turn it in, obviously that's not a ballot that the election committee would accept during the election. We added email as a way to request absentee ballots. We have set up an election committee Gmail address, which we intend to keep using. We also will be renting a post office box so that the absentee ballots do not have to come back here. We also did not look into online voting, although it was raised in an early committee meeting. The sense of the residents, although it was sort of 50-50, and I think the sense of the committee was as well, that was a kind of a step too far, and we understand some jurisdictions are actually, in fact, going back away from online voting. I'm trying to see what else I've missed here. There was a great deal of interest. Probably we got the most public comment on candidate information, and asking, at least one voter asked, and we thought it was quite a good idea, that candidates certify that they not have any conflict of interest, meaning some sort of undisclosed financial interest with the council or the staff or other council members. And so we intend to incorporate that into the written statement. One of the comments that we got from residents that we think is a very good idea is that in addition to the free-form written statements that candidates would prepare, that the election committee provide a format for their statements that would include some standard questions, in addition for them to write, whatever they wanted, but also to provide some commonality. So, but we didn't want to set those out in the procedures to be the same every year, because it may be, although we expect them to be sort of standard, what do you think are the biggest issues facing the village this year and so forth, we didn't want to create such a locked down system that as things and issues develop, that there wasn't the flexibility for the election committee to design a process from year to year. So that's really it. It's all in writing. I'm getting some feedback. I'm probably talking too loudly or something. But happy to answer any questions that folks have on the specific provisions and the procedures.
Questions from the council right now?
So I just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
You guys have met several times, looking at the charter, looking at the code, looking at what other people do, looking at the United States Postal Code, and I know that was a lot of work, and I appreciate it. I admittedly have not read it, but I'm okay with that because you're just presenting them to us now. So I think for us the question will be, we need a little bit of time to look at them, and maybe a work session before the next council meeting.
Yeah, so we will be adopting the procedures, not probably word for word, but this will be the major input into it. Now, there's one issue that arises, at least one of the recommendations involves changing the charter, and we are discussing other possible charter changes. That is not the same easy, nicely laid out flow as in changing the ordinances. And in fact, the recommendation that you made to move the process up closer to the beginning of the new fiscal year is also a recommendation that we are entertaining from the law firm that went through our code and charter. Informally, the council seems to be in favor of that for all the reasons that you and others have noted. But that's a completely different process than changing the code or adopting the procedures. But we will be moving on this quickly. I would like to get this in place for the next election, and I think we can do that.
We have a work session and then adopt procedure. Well, first of all, can we adopt procedures at the next council meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that fit your timeline for what you need as far as this election cycle?
I believe our next work session was scheduled, and we were going to send out the newsletter. We understand and have proposed, and I think this was discussed in open meeting last time, that the election this year, because we can't change because of the charter.
Because of the dates. The dates we cannot change.
Yes, and we actually noted in our report to residents that, in fact, our charter provisions can't actually go into effect this year, except to the extent that they don't conflict with the existing charter. So the date is supposed to be May 12th, which means that, or at least that's the date that's been suggested and recommended. So our next work session is February 23rd, and that's where we would be designing, the questions that we think would go in the statement, making sure we've got the PO box lined up, all that sort of stuff. So if we could know what we're dealing with before February 23rd, that would be ideal. If those dates need to change, someone could just let us know and we can try to...
Procedures.
Our next meeting is on February 18th.
Okay.
So that should work.
And the more complete answer to Tiffany's question would be yes, administrative procedures can be adopted on the spot.
But there are...
Our charter does require...
The charter requires, and there are some code changes here suggested as well.
Well, the charter has some broad language in it that states regulations have the same 30-day layover as an ordinance. So if there's something that's in the recommendation, which I've not read yet either, that's in the nature of a regulation or changing the existing law, that would have to follow the same process as an ordinance.
Okay. But if we get started now, we can have it ready for the next election.
As long as they're adopted by April 12th,
right,
then all the rest of the steps make sense because for soliciting the candidate feedback and statements.
It's actually April 12th.
Look at my calendar.
So if we want the full 60 days, we really need them by like March 11th.
But we can, the 60 days is just for the notification to solicit interest.
Yeah.
But the rest of the stuff, the things about the mailing dates for absentee ballots and all that can be commented, I think, within a month.
Yeah, but the written statement stuff, the intent was to send that out with the solicitation. So it may be that gets, we have to rejigger that timing a little bit. But there is a point here about, what's expanding on what's in the charter and what's within the flexibility that exists versus what's actually in conflict.
Right,
and whether it's in conflict with the charter or...
I think a work session will
We can do a work session easily.
to work through all this. We will proceed with all deliberate speed.
We did have a clause recommending that there's always cold beer.
For the counters.
We got struck at the last minute, but if you want us to reinstate.
Okay.
That was a bad cut and paste, I'm sorry.
So there is not 30 days in between the February and March meetings, which would mean if you did need an ordinance, it couldn't be acted upon until April unless you scheduled a special meeting.
Yeah.
And adopting in April on the 21st would then require a 20-day time period before the changes take effect unless you declare them to be an emergency. But I mean, there is plenty of time. If
So we will get a work session going as soon as possible. This is January. Okay. Thank you for all the work. And as I said, something that I discovered during the last election process and looking at the code and charter that we did not have what we were supposed to have. I said, uh-oh, we have a big gap here, and you have been filling that gap. The next thing is the Centennial Committee.
Hello, my name is Naomi Nyerman. I'm the chair of the Centennial Committee, and Susan Fadlick is also on the committee, as is Richard Krachek and Michelle Malloy, who is a professional event planner. Lucky for us. She's been very helpful. So far, this is what we know. We're in the early stages. We have a date, April 17th, at the Chevy Chase Club, Women's Club, I should say, from 2 to 5. And we will accommodate the children with entertainment, yet to be selected, looking at some alternatives. And we will have 3 to 4 presentations. At least one of them, actually cut up in 2, will be the history of the village, for which we are lucky to have Paul Weller, really well-informed and very well-spoken man, and he's putting together a program that goes all the way back to pre-Civil War, but and all the way up to here. So we are also engaging Paul Wolf, who will talk about the evolution of trees in our village. I think it'll be very interesting, and we're going to do a dry run of that in a week or 2. By the way, I will say it often as I can, we're looking for photographs, other kinds of images to intersperse along the presentation, which would be not so much in lecture form, but certainly needs some interface with interesting images. We will have music, we hope, either background music to set the tone, and or a song that may be written on our behalf, kind of an anthem song. Still talking to a songwriter who is local, just exploring that option right now. Program will be between, if I didn't already mention, so the whole thing will be from 2 to 5, and the program will be 3 to 4. We'll have a cake, pizza and ice cream for the kids. And the budget so far is around $15,000, but it does not include what videography we may need, and the music, and the children's entertainment. I do not foresee exceeding the $20,000 that's in the budget already. I would be very surprised if it does, and I will give you plenty of early warning if it does. In fact, Paul Weller was saying today that he thinks he can get some vendors to sponsor the music portion, if not other kinds of things. And we are envisioning the room being the stage, of course, for the presenters, but then on the outskirts of the room, having vendors come. But even more importantly, people in the village who have written books, who had CDs, to show off their talent.
Good.
I'm not sure if I've missed anything. We have an outline of this in writing for you all, and certainly we'll be getting updates as we go along.
Thank you. Susan, do you have any comment?
We'll be doing some interviews too.
Right. We're really going to get some stories of interesting, pivotal events and very interesting people.
You know, we do have some from the some interviews along here somewhere.
Yeah, we do. And
past.
we're hoping that we can tape some of them and show them on video in special booths along the way. But some people really are not keen about being videographed, so we'll have to go along with the flow.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions?
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Moving along there. Okay, the Ethics Committee.
Sorry we're late, Mark.
I want to mention, as Mark comes up here, we have more active involvement, community involvement in various committees and other activities than we've ever had in my 6 years or so on the council.
I'm pleased to be part of that, I suppose. So the Ethics Committee had its initial meeting on January 13th. It was an open meeting, although somebody had to correct the initial notice that went out that didn't say it was an open meeting, but it was corrected, and it was attended by the 3 members of the committee, who were Celeste Biagini, Jimmy Joyce, and myself, and by Richard Krajek and Tiffany. So we had that attendance. The first meeting we had was really to discuss, was one, to introduce ourselves, since we didn't know each other, although Celeste and I knew each other. But the real purpose of the meeting was to review what our agenda would be for the year. Initially, we reviewed what the various provisions of the code and other things say we're supposed to do, and we understand that. We now have the new issue about special counsel that we'll look at. And we also reviewed the letter that the council received from the law firm doing a legal compliance and ethical conflict of interest review, which said essentially that the provisions in the code now are adequate, but then we talked about whether or not we thought that adequate was sufficient, and we didn't really decide that it wasn't, but we really decided that we would have a meeting in 2 weeks after we reviewed things such as the model code in Maryland and other local villages' ethics provisions to see what we might flesh out from what we already have. I think it's fair to say we already have some issues that we know are issues. There's a gift provision that talks, I think, about a $50 exception, but it doesn't say whether that's a lifetime exception or per day or per hour or whatever. So there are certain definitional things like that that have to be cleared up. I think there's also a view that the conflict of interest sort of definition and rules is a little bit murky, and so we're going to try to go through that. But long story short, we meet again on the 27th at an open meeting that will be here. I can't promise there'll be beer like Steve provides unless he wants to provide it to us. But we'll have a meeting on the 27th. It's already been noticed and put on the it's been sent around on one of the types of communications that we use. And we will turn to reviewing the current code against these other models to start our process of coming up with suggestions, if any, on how to make this a better code. So I invite anybody who wants to show up on the 27th to be here.
I have one quick question. Ron, perhaps you can help. My reading of this is that the Ethics Committee and the Ethics Code is all about conflicts of interest.
Yes, it's about gifts and conflicts of interest.
Right, and so you can't offer the garbage contract to your brother-in-law, sort of thing. There is nothing about other kinds of ethical behavior, or is that a whole, or is that something that we want to stay away from? Because there was last year a question referred to the Ethics Committee that did not fall into the conflict of interest, and they correctly noted this is not our bag, but they came up with a suggestion of advice anyway. Is this something that we should even think about getting into, or is that just too big of a hole to start?
I think it's a good idea to have the conversation. By way of background, there is a state ethics law which covers 3 things: conflicts of interest, financial disclosure, and lobbying.
What was the third thing?
Lobbying. Now, when the village code was first written, largely by Mike Zielinski, who's in the audience.
We know Mike.
Mike and the other founding fathers helped draft the first conflicts of interest provision, and it is very similar to what other similarly sized towns have. The state law is much more comprehensive, but small towns can be deemed exempt from those requirements because there is a recognition that some of those requirements, especially financial disclosure, can have a chilling effect on finding candidates for office. And so Mike sent a letter to the State Ethics Commission asking for confirmation that the village is exempt, but asking for a blessing of the ordinance that the village was going to adopt, so we did have some conflicts of interest coverage. And the state found that appropriate, and found it appropriate in 1986 and again in 2003, I think, or 2013.
About 2 years ago. Yeah.
But you're certainly, welcome to have the conversation again, should there be more. And I think what you have, is consistent in the industry. Actual conflicts are very rare.
What about other ethical issues that might arise? I can't think of what they might be.
Some other
bad behavior.
Sure.
So we got, we received some suggestions of areas that the committee might want to look at. And again, we also understand the financial disclosure issue that was explained to us. It makes sense. But there were some other issues that I don't know if they fit in the ethics code or not. It's just because they were thrown out there. One having to do with the protection of confidential proprietary information. Now, whether I know that's not typically something in an ethics code, but it might be something that is suggested that it be there somewhere. So there are issues like that were put on our platter. We also had a bunch of election-related issues that were referred to us that I think are being taken care of just fine by the Elections Committee, happily. In there somewhere was also the suggestion that candidates represent that they don't have a conflict of interest. We might actually, there's a little discussion about whether we want to have, a periodic, maybe yearly form that everybody who is covered has to sign to say that they don't have a conflict of interest, or they do and disclose it, which one is probably good housekeeping for the village, but also reminds people of their obligations not to have a conflict of interest. So we're just starting this process, and I'm sure we'll be coming to you.
I thought of a possible example of something. Suppose a council member is elected who engages in obstructionist behavior that whose intent is to stop business from occurring. Now, it could be legal and taking every legal opportunity to do so, but is this something that you might want to take a look at? Is this getting into, you're shaking your head, into a ball of worms or a ball of wax or a can of worms?
Yeah, that would be pretty uncommon. I mean, sometimes municipal charters and codes will have removal provisions if a council member is absent for a certain number of meetings, but just obstructing because they disagree with the policy, I don't think so.
Okay. I'm just trying to think.
I can give you some other concrete examples. Other examples are, we grant variances in the village. So, one provision may be, after a council member leaves office, they shall not for 1 year help someone get a variance. That's in the state law.
Okay, I'm just trying to see if
the other area, you jumped ahead of me. I mean, you got it. I mean, the other area you can look at that's often in corporate ethics codes and government codes is revolving door issues. I don't know if that's really an issue here or not, but it's we're not dealing with the federal government here or huge budgets. But again, I welcome any suggestions that people have. We're only trying to reflect what we can figure out and what the village wants, and if people want to put things on our plate, we're fine.
And if I could also add,
on his calendar.
Yeah, I'm going to open up my lobby.
And if I could also add, the ordinance that is on the agenda tonight comprises amendments that have been collected over the years, but does not represent a global review of the code and recommendation for amendment of the code, knowing that the compliance review was in the pipeline and that the Ethics Commission would be looking at the ethics laws. So what's on the table tonight doesn't purport to be a cleanup of the ethics laws.
So the last thing I'd just like to say in terms of timing, originally we were asked if we could do this in time for the next election, and why incrementally we may have suggestions for the next election. I'm not very optimistic that we'll be able to have a really well thought out reasonable presentation that is comprehensive of the ethics provision by the next election.
But may I ask the council, and why Mark's at the podium, because we do have an ordinance on the table tonight, and to address Mike Zielinski's comment, would it be better to to word that provision to say, review the complaint with the village attorney or special counsel selected by the committee in consultation with the village attorney. Does that do it, Mike?
Yeah, you're not appointed.
What, hold on, let's give Mark what he's...
I've got the provision here. I've got it here.
You have 6, okay.
So I take it the problem is having the village's lawyer be able to appoint the special counsel?
Yeah, and I guess it's, what does the term appointment mean? I mean, if it's selecting or identifying somebody, that's one thing, but it's going to have to be a contractual relationship with the village. And I think Ron, much of that doesn't have.
It does seem to me that the governing body of the village, I mean, I don't know, I mean, unless there's an individual member here that's of the council who's alleged to have a conflict, the governing body of the village is the council, right? And everybody reports to the council. The village managers report to the council. So it would seem to me, again, off the cuff, and sort of consistent with things that I've seen in the corporate world, that the special counsel generally are appointed by either the board or by a subset of the board if you had a legal committee or whatever. But it seems to me there could be a provision that any board member who's involved in whatever the process is shall recuse themselves, but they would have to do that anyway.
Another option would be just to delay. We could take that amendment out until the ethics.
But my off-the-cuff thought is I don't know how much more distance you can get than have the board make the appointment and make whatever retention letter has to be signed come through the board. I don't know how more. It seems to be more democratic to have the board do it than an appointed.
But if the board is the one, if the council is the group that's being under investigation or being charged, the council as a whole.
Well, then that would be,
larger problems.
I guess first of all, if there's a conflict of interest for any individual member, you can't vote anyway. I think that's probably covered or would be covered. And if the entire group of council members, I guess there could be a fail-safe thing that says if that's the case, then the appointment can be made by the committee or whoever you want to choose.
But just to clarify, we don't expect that to happen.
Could you leave whoever the appointment authority is open?
Yeah, that's what you're just suggesting.
In consultation with the village attorney, and it's not stated there.
Yeah,
doing the appointment.
Perhaps for right now.
That would work as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the language? I want to look at all 3 of the attorneys that are discussing that.
All 3, how many attorneys do we have in this room?
No one's and the
more
one in the
than
back
3.
is not representing the village of whatsoever.
I'm actually in favor of having it clear as to who makes the appointment. Otherwise, in a period of squabbling, you can get into a squabble about that and argue about the shape of the table for a long time.
Well, rather than wordsmithing it right now, maybe it would be best just to remove that amendment from the table tonight until the committee reviews the whole chapter in total.
But I would say, Mark, since this is one of those things that it's been an ongoing list for years, and it's one of the things the council's trying to do is get some of the lists done. So make sure this is one thing that you guys are very clear.
Got it.
to us.
Posted right there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Because I need to look at the state model again as well, but I think there's something in the state model that says there shall be money set aside for the ethics committee to use if they have to select special counsel.
So our starting point in reviews is going to be the model code. I mean, if this is the broadest, it doesn't mean it's the best for this, but it's most comprehensive. So that's what we're looking at as a starting point together with the other villages that are around here. And I think you were good enough. Or somebody sent us websites. Somebody did. Anyway.
I think that was me.
Okay, well, thank you. I think you can see that the committees are doing their work, doing their homework. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Action on the council meeting minutes from the last meeting. I think we've all approved that online by email, and we can consider them as having been approved. Do we have a motion to approve them?
I move to approve.
Okay, Susan moves to approve
The minutes from December
from the
17th.
minutes from the last meeting.
I'll second.
And I'll vote aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved. Okay, now we are moving on to the infamous bag of ordinance amendments. And I should note once again, we first did this in September, I believe.
Yes.
So it's September, October, November, December, and January.
Yes.
Okay, Tiffany.
So we've been discussing these in meetings since September. The text that we were working off of was on the website, included in the October meeting minutes. And just again to reiterate, and I heard Mike talking to Ron earlier about this, there was a list that's been collected over the years of simple things that have come up. But as Ron said, this is not a holistic review of the code. This is, let's address the now long list of simple things that have come up and see if we can get those off the table for going forward. We actually had our required hearing in December. We knew that was going to be a tough time, holiday time for folks, so we planned on having a second hearing today, just to have open discussion for residents who wanted to come forward and ask questions. So I think we can just start our hearing. Yes?
Yeah. Okay. Which means we are open to discussions of these quite a large number of very small changes to the code. Yes, sir.
John McDonald, Summit Avenue. Question about the amendments. I don't have the text in front of me, but am I correct that one of the amendments seeks to make unpaid volunteers employees of the village?
No, I can address
Right,
that
yeah,
if
please.
you like. So,
Yes.
John, would
Because
you
that
like a
opens
copy?
up
Would you like a copy?
Here.
financial disclosure issues.
No. Here, let me flip to the page.
so one of
I
the
probably couldn't find it, I'll leave it to
Yeah.
Ron to reply.
one of the
Okay.
proposed edits is to change the word manager to code enforcement officer in several sections, which would shift certain responsibilities such as approving permits, deciding conditions to the code enforcement officer. The reason that was being proposed is because there are already in the code other provisions which give similar duties to the code enforcement officer, including, for example, issuing a demolition permit, I believe. So this amendment would make the code consistent by shifting all responsibilities related to buildings to the code enforcement officer. But as Arthur pointed out on the listserv very recently, I believe, the definition of code enforcement officer is the village manager or such other person designated by the council. So although we're changing the term in the code to make it consistently code enforcement officer, by definition that's the village manager unless the council selects somebody else.
I think it's referring to this, public official, the redefining of what a public official is.
Well, I think he was asking about the shifting of...
No,
Which question
No,
was
I'm
it?
asking about unpaid volunteers. Are
Here.
unpaid volunteers intended to be deemed employees in the
Here, because a person who is employed by the village includes a volunteer who is
Where are you
providing
looking,
services. Section 2-301. And then this new definition recurs throughout, or this modified definition, 2301.
Right, so that's already in the code.
Yeah.
Currently, a volunteer who provides services or performed duties at the request of a public official was deemed an employee for purposes of Chapter 2. That's not changing. That's already in the
So
code.
therefore, they can be subject to the financial disclosure provisions.
Well,
of
we don't
the
have
state
financial disclosure provisions. but-
Because you obtain an exception.
Right.
But the exception is not permanent.
Correct. the state could determine that we're no longer eligible.
When do you have to reapply for it?
We don't. The exception stays in place until such time as the State Ethics Commission
the
determines
State
it's no
Ethics
longer appropriate.
Commission could so determine.
They could. They have the authority to do an annual review.
Okay.
But quite frankly, under their current regulations, it's unlikely that we would ever lose the exemption. The exemption applies based on two factors primarily, your population and your budget. And as long as we're under those limits, we wouldn't lose the exemption.
Well, we have to look at the practicalities. On the other hand, we know what happened in Chevy Chase Village. So, all right, so if I understand correctly, then unpaid volunteers are deemed employees under the current code even before the amendments.
Correct, right.
Nice.
For purposes of Chapter 2.
But say, what are the purposes of
Yeah,
Chapter
let
2?
me-
It's not, this isn't just a big blanket thing. It's very narrow purposes.
Sure. Give me 1 second. All right, so the village is obligated to provide insurance and defense for those that are performing services by the village in the event they're sued for performing services.
So the aim of the amendment is really benign.
Yeah.
to
Oh, yeah.
See that insurance covers the unpaid volunteers.
Right, right. So if you serve on a committee and you're sued based on what you did as a committee member.
He'll defend you.
Well,
Thank you, sir.
Somebody will.
the village's insurance,
Right, right.
if money
Thank you.
damages are sought.
Good, thank you.
This concludes my comment.
Good, thank you. I have to say, we've gone over this, and we've spent hours going over this, for raising just the kinds of issues that you're raising.
Yeah, and
Yeah. Any other comment? Yes.
Marty Langland again. I just want to start out by saying thank you, because I have had to do this in my job, this kind of painful line-by-line review of documentation, and I think that you all deserve commendations for your thoroughness and care and meticulousness and just downright patience to get this done. I had a question about Section 7209, maintenance of public right-of-ways, on page 23 here in the document.
Okay.
And it talks about any non-public structure, wall, fence, tree, hedge, shrubbery, or other plant growth located in the right-of-way. My house on Chestnut Street is at the top of the hill, and for the last 28 of the last 30 years that we've lived there, I have been digging a rain garden along the street there to catch the runoff water, which I think is in line with our larger ecological and village goals. I now have a very nice garden bed there. At the moment it has some pretty pansies in it, and daisies in the spring, and mint and lavender, and anyway, it's 100 feet of footage, and it's, I dug out the clay 3 feet down, 4 feet back, and put in loam and sand to make it a giant sponge, and there is no longer runoff from the hill on top of Chestnut Street. It worked. I didn't hire anyone, I did it myself. My question is, does this section 7209 give some future council, I know this council would never do this, but some future council could come in and say, Marty, you have to pull up your rose bush, all your daffodils, right? We're going to make it lawn again. Or will they respect the rain garden along that 100-foot front footage?
Let me start off, then you can get to it. First of all, that's been in the code. That's been there. That's not
I know,
being
I've
changed.
always worried about it.
Right, okay. One of the intents of this is that often in the public right-of-way, the utilities go through. And if they have to dig it up to put it in a pipe or cable or something like that, we run into a number of different issues. First, the homeowner thinks it's theirs. You can't do that. You can't dig up my pansies. They say, no, this is part of the public way, and the cable is going through. And this, I think, has been the biggest conflict that we've run into. People have to come out attacking utility workers for doing that. The other thing are structures, fences, obstructions that prohibit the trash trucks coming by, opening up car doors and so on, that are also prohibited. And I think these are the two things that I can think of that we've had concerns about, not wantonly going out and digging up pansies. But any other comment, Ron?
I want to ask Ron to fill in the blank, because I think the in violation of any provision of this section is going to be the key to answering her question. So, Ron, go ahead.
Sure, yeah. So, I don't know if you have a copy of the complete code.
No, I have the what you put up on the...
Right, which, it doesn't reproduce the whole code, but Section A of that provision, 7209A, says basically, the village expects abutting owners to maintain that portion of the public right-of-way that's currently not needed for public use. So the area in between the sidewalk and your front property line, you maintain. But you have to maintain it in such a manner that it doesn't interfere with the sidewalk or with motorists.
In Marty's case, it's the street.
Or the
street, right.
And so that provision says plants need to be kept at 12 inches or less. So if all your flowers are...
I have a rose bush that's well on...
Well, one of the purposes of that is for access to vehicles, ambulances, and so on. That they're not obstructed by things planted.
But as a practical matter, there is vegetation throughout the village, and unless there's a problem, the village isn't going to enforce that right to restore the right of way to plain grass or
I'm not
whatever.
going to rip out my rose bush.
No. Unless a motorist were to say, I can't see around the corner of this corner lot because there's a giant hemlock tree right there, or a pedestrian would say, I can't walk on the sidewalk on this particular street because there are hedges that cover the sidewalk. That's the situation typically where the council's going to step in and say, can you please cut that back?
Or I had an occasion where, not here, but in the village, rose bushes in the verge there, and the brambles kind of, walking by at night, didn't see them, and they kind of ripped across my face.
That's an issue.
Yeah, and so they were was at this height and kind of spread out over the sidewalk. But, so that's, that could be an issue.
And you'll particularly like this provision, subparagraph B. Any tree, hedge, shrubbery, or other plant growth located within the right-of-way, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, as of December 9, 2009, may be maintained and replaced, provided it doesn't interfere with pedestrian or vehicular traffic, etc. So your rose bush is grandfathered as long as it doesn't interfere.
That's fabulous. It's an heirloom rose bush, and I thank you for clarifying that, and I appreciate your attention to it. You're all welcome to come pick the mint, which is also in that front garden.
Thank you. Okay, so then moving on.
Keith, do you have anything? You're the last resident here, so he says no.
Okay.
No, there's none. I mean, we talked about the weather earlier. Everybody knows what's going on. They don't need me to tell them that.
Okay, then moving on to this, we can now adopt this, right?
And so if...
With the amendment discussed earlier that we're going to defer to...
Right, so the motion would be to adopt the ordinance as amended, and the amendment would be, there would be no change to section 4202, subsection B.
Okay.
Reason being, we're going to wait for the Ethics Committee to provide us a recommendation on that.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to move that we adopt ordinance number 11-15-1.
I will second that.
As amended.
As amended.
As amended. I will second that as amended. All votes for?
Aye.
Aye. God, we got that off the table.
Guys, it's a lot of work to do here. A lot of work, and I appreciate your patience. It's more than I can say.
Okay, moving on. Okay, the compliance review. And Tiffany, do you want to introduce the review and the review of the review?
The review of the review. So, October, November of last year at Funk & Bolton, it's a firm that has a quite a municipal practice to do a legal and ethical conflict of interest review. The letter that they sent us is on the village website. What the council did then was to go through the letter and section by section, line by line, decide, do we agree, do we disagree?
Could I ask one quick question? When you see the council, this is the first time I've seen this.
This was sent to you a while ago, so we went through
the Funk and Wagnall, the Funk
Yes.
and Bolt. Yeah.
Funk and Bolton.
This review.
Yes. So line by line, and there's a council response in the document. Do we agree, disagree? And then what, if any, actions would we propose to take or not take? The good news for us is that many of the actions that they recommend are being addressed in the code amendment ordinance that was just passed. They are going to be addressed by the elections committee information, like having processes that we need to have. That's already underway. The ethics committee is looking at it. There are a couple things that the council might need to look at in the future. What I would say is, this document that we did the line by line starts at number 1 and goes through number 53 recommendations. It'll go up on the website along with the full document from Funk and Bolton.
I just want to return. Council recommendations. The council never recommended this.
Sorry. So the
heading.
This is our response.
Response, right.
To their recommendations.
Yeah.
And all of this will be on the website?
All of it will be.
Just the wording of that is that.
Well, we have to. So they made recommendations.
Yeah.
To us. What are we going to do with the
right.
recommendations?
So these are really your responses, right?
These are mine based off of all of the work that we've been doing. So
because I haven't seen any of this work until just receiving this.
Well, okay, let's use a couple of them, for example. Number 1, ensure consistency of the abbreviations throughout. It's in number
tab 6.
It's essentially an embodiment of issues that have already been discussed, but it's in a format that you may not have seen.
I sent it around the email. And Ron has reviewed it. So just like I said, for example, the first one, they did a whole section on charter recommendations. Funk and Bolton says you should ensure consistency of abbreviations, VMA throughout. Ron says, I defer to the council. You can use both Martin's Edition, you can use Village, may or may not be an issue. We actually agree. In the past, we've agreed with Funk and Bolton's recommendation to, if we're going to clean up the charter, then we should clean up the charter. And whatever the abbreviations are should be consistent throughout. So then the next column says, action and notes taken, that we should make this change when we do a charter revision, which will be a longer process, even in the ordinance revision.
So my asterisk, the footnote that was attached to that fell off, and I'm sure it was my fault. But I'll just tell you what it was. When I say defer to the council, as Tiffany said, there are some edits that I think are good edits, but from the legal standpoint, not really necessary. And so you've got to decide, is it worth the cost to go through a charter amendment or a code amendment to implement it? But if you're going through and doing a comprehensive edit anyway, you might as well stick it in.
Let me, there was one down thing here about amend definition of qualified voter and resident. They suggested something I very strongly disagree with, of requiring to be a citizen.
Okay, so Ron has given us counsel on qualified voter. The elections committee has given us counsel. We have agreed in the past that we need to resolve that question about qualified voter. I did not write out, and I apologize for that, the changes will be made. Doesn't necessarily mean that we agree with the changes. We agree that we need to make an amendment. Ron's given us, I said council has advised voter qualification issue. So we need to go back and again refresh everybody's memory on what Ron has told us he thinks we need to do regarding voter qualification, and again, the Elections Committee has a recommendation.
So are we going to go through, I would like to go through
Do you want to
this.
go through it line by line?
Line by line.
Let's go.
Not tonight, but at some point as we go through it, like we did with the previous amendment.
I mean,
Can I make it? Sure. On the voter qualifications, the committee, the election committee, spent, good time talking about, a good bit of time talking about that, and felt very strongly that our village needs to be as inclusive as possible. And that we wanted both renters and owners to be able to vote, and we wanted anybody 18 and older, and they did not have to be a U.S. citizen, they did not have to be registered to vote in the state of Maryland or in any state, that we wanted to basically make our voter base as inclusive as possible, because we believed in democracy. And that was actually said at a meeting by a whole bunch of people. So we took that very seriously, and I share that strong committee sense with you.
so I think we can do this, the easy way? Yeah, the easy way or the hard way. I did circulate this about a month ago, so I think maybe the easiest thing to do would be to find areas where there might be questions, and then focus on those.
I had a copy. Is this mine? No, this
That's
is yours.
mine.
This is. No, I had my own copy where I had all kinds of
No,
notes
I just
and
pulled this out of my
everything on it.
binder.
Okay, so mine, something happened. Okay.
But
Good.
we can move on.
Yeah, because I had a lot of things just checked off, but a lot of things I had, there were
Well, and I think there's
issues to be discussed.
whether or not whether we make their exact changes or we make changes when we do a charter amendment, make changes to the ordinance when we do ordinance amendments. That's on we have to do that later. We don't have to agree with what they said, but that we agree, yes, that issue that they raised needs to be addressed, and here's the venue by which we would address it, whether it's a charter piece, a code piece, a policy, or a regulation.
Ron, can you refresh our memory? Because we've never done it since I've been on the council. How do you amend the charter?
You prepare an amendment document which is similar to an ordinance, but the big difference is instead of just introducing it to the residents, we've got to publish it in a newspaper of general circulation. And unlike an ordinance where we can pack in as many amendments as we want, a charter amendment requires one separate document for every separate charter amendment. You can only have one subject matter in each charter amendment, so there will be a lot of separate amendment documents. We've got to publish notice of those in the newspaper. Once adopted, we have to give the Secretary of State a copy of what's been amended, and under state law, all charter amendments are subject to referendum, but that's not a big difference for Martin's Additions because our code amendment.
I would say that the Chevy Chase Village just did it.
Yeah.
They have completed their charter amendment process, so it is possible.
It's possible, but it's lengthy and involved and, okay.
Thus, we tackled the ordinance first.
Right. Yeah.
So, again, this will go up on the website, the council proposed response, and maybe we can I'll add a draft for discussion purposes, watermark, so that it's very clear to everyone that just because we say we agree that something needs to be addressed doesn't mean we agree with how they addressed it.
Correct, yeah.
Right.
We would need it to be, we agree that it does need to be addressed as an issue.
Yeah, and the voter is a good example. We say in the box, agree, but that doesn't mean we agree with
their
Funk and Bolton's proposed language, because...
So we can just add a disclaimer that you and I can agree on.
Right.
Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah. 'Cause right now, non-citizens can vote in the village.
Yes. Yeah.
As can residents and non-residents.
Correct.
Which you and the elections committee have differing desires.
That's right. So the way it's stated, they're suggesting residents and owners who may be non-residents.
And U.S. citizens.
No,
it doesn't say U.S. citizens.
The Funk and Bolton recommendation.
Funk and Bolton does. Yeah, they say U.S. citizens.
We recommend
Right,
as inclusive
open,
as possible.
inclusive, right.
So we're all over the place.
So where are we moving on this? And we will then have to take this up.
I would say, maybe we can talk through the council, whether it's just you and I going through some of these. If the clarification is that we agree something needs to be done, but the what needs to be done depends on what's in the last column that says those action taken, then we're not saying we agree with what they said. We're saying we agree, and this is where we're going to address the issue. That might solve some of the concerns about, we don't have to say specific, make changes when charter amendment is done.
Right.
Well, we're not doing a charter amendment tomorrow, but we do agree, yes, when the charter is amended, we have to address whatever the issue is.
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable?
Yes, I will, if I can find my marked up sheet.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, issues on this? Okay, let's move on. Street lighting. Katya is not here tonight. Do we know what she was going to say?
Yes. So she emailed the council saying once the decision was made about what type of light we were going to have, we chose induction. She went back to Scott Watson, our lighting consultant, and discussed with him, okay, what are the different options for the light fixture, to use the non-technical term, that we have. Whether it's a kind of a teardrop with a skirt, without a skirt.
Finial, no finial.
Finial, no finial, etc. And after talking with
There's
Scott...
only one option.
After talking with Scott, it appeared that his recommendation was teardrop with a skirt. And so really the last question for us was...
black or green? Black
or green, as far as the color of the fixture itself. So she is recommending that we, if the three of us are comfortable making a decision on that and moving on, that we do that. And then the second question is for, Ron needs to address it about our budget amendment process.
Okay.
So let's talk about black or green. Shocking, I have an opinion.
I have no opinion.
I don't have a strong opinion.
No.
I don't really care that much, as long as they work.
I think black kind of holds up aesthetically. What it looks like when it first goes up isn't going to be what it's like in 3 years. So I would just say black.
Okay. Susan?
Strong opinion? No. No strong opinion.
What is your...
I really don't care.
You really don't care?
Don't.
Great, then black it is. And I'll give you my reason why.
Yeah.
When you look at the light, when you look up,
you don't see the color.
You can see the green, but you can't see the black at night.
Oh, interesting.
Where's there? Are there greens around?
The one on Georgia is green. And actually one on Bradley is black and one on Bradley is green.
So yeah, you can include a contingency. You can allocate.
So do we need to do, the second question Katya had for us was the estimate with the light that we have selected, the fixture that we have selected. It says in order for us to proceed with the project, we need to move $330,497 from our reserves into our current budget. So do we need to do a budget amendment for that?
Yes.
Okay, the money has been allocated, reserved for that.
That's what I was going to ask. Is it coming from reserves or is it coming from capital improvements?
No, it's coming from designated reserves, designated with lighting.
Yeah, so then you would not need to amend the budget if it's already in the budget as...
It's
not
in the budget, it's in it's in the reserves, it's in designated reserves.
Okay.
Tori's got it.
Yeah, it's already been budgeted for $500,000.
So do we need to do anything further to say that we're going to use a certain amount of that money?
You don't need to do anything at this time. Once a contract is submitted, you would approve the contract, but the monies have already been appropriated for that contract.
Yeah, good.
Okay. So I think for the record, we just can say again that between Katya's work and Scott, and the estimates that we had, we're expecting to spend about $330,000 $500 to update the lights that we have, as well as add, I think, 7 or 8 additional lights in the areas of the village that had been noted as being dark. That consists of a quoted amount and about 10% for a project overrun reserve, which is pretty common.
And let me just make sure,
Yeah.
is that $500,000 still there, or have we used some of it? For
No, we haven't used any.
Haven't used any of it? 'Cause it's- Oh, it's just street lighting.
It's just street
Yeah.
lighting.
Oh, yeah, we're good.
I would like to reserve a little bit more for gaps that may be found after the lights are put in. Because after we put in the lights, we might find that there are still some dark areas that we want to fill in. So put in a little bit more.
So we have, well, the money's already there. We
Yeah,
have about
right.
$500,000
Right.
that we've
So
said
if we're
we're
going
gonna
to,
spend
right,
on
if we're going to
this.
have a motion or resolution to approve
I
moving
don't
forward,
think,
we
we said
don't
we don't
need
have
that.
to.
Okay, so let's move forward.
Okay.
That's, go, go, go. That's what you
So
need to
the
say.
next steps will be for her to circle up with
Yeah.
the staff and Scott. And since this is a larger project, we'll probably get some input from you and maybe some other project managers in the village on.
Yeah. And the thing is, we don't have a choice of installers, do we? It's Pepco.
I think.
No, Katya explained that. We could go with somebody else, but then when it came to servicing them, like, we would own
Right.
all of those other things.
Yeah. So this is this going to conflict with our competitive bidding?
We have to
we
bid
don't-
it.
Hmm?
We have to bid it.
We have to bid it, but there's only one feasible
About the
contractor.
servicer, but who we can get the lights through, the fixtures through.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
just Pepco.
Okay, but the installation.
You'd have to ask
Does this
her.
include everything? For the lights, the installation, the whatever service for the remainder of the year after installed?
I don't know that includes service. I think
No.
it includes the lights and the
Well-
fixtures, but we can confirm with her.
Okay.
Let's see. In order for this amount consists of a quote from Scott and extra 10% for project reserve.
So Pepco's doing the installation, but we are buying the posts for Pepco to install?
I thought it was all up in the air, whether we were doing it through Pepco or not.
Well, we can
certainly
confirm
could
that.
do it
Okay.
that way, but I'm not
Yeah.
sure that's what she chose.
The posts we're using the same
We're
posts.
using the
We're
utility
using the poles
poles,
that we have.
Just
They're
changing
the
the
fixtures.
lamps.
Yeah.
lamps and
And they are Pepco poles, so
Yes.
Pepco will want to put those lamps on presumably.
Yeah.
But Scott has located different vendors where they can be obtained. So I'm
Yes.
guessing we get to choose the vendor, but then we give it to Pepco to install.
Yeah.
I think you
Or
could do
Hall of
everything.
Fame. What do you think of what?
I thought it was an option that you could do everything. I could be mistaken.
well,
We do have the option to. Well, I don't want to
Including
open up
including servicing it yourself after the fact.
Yes, you could.
Yes.
Yeah.
if you buy the poles, right? Well, it doesn't-
I'm not sure about that. But maybe.
So we've made a decision on the light that we want. We've made a
fixtures.
decision on the fixture that we want and the color that we want.
Okay, well, so we can
now
start
it's a
moving forward.
Contracting process that
Right.
can go forward.
Good.
And we've got the money already taken.
The money's there. Money's in the
All right.
bank. Okay.
Next.
Great. Financial report. The financial, we're looking good. But we don't have a report from Katya.
We don't have a report from Katya. We have the financial.
We have the
delivers from Dan.
Right.
And then we probably need to do some budget amendments, which
Oh, right. That's right.
circulated some suggestions.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much.
Do we have, is that in the package
It's at
here?
the very back of the financial section.
Okay.
There are 4 proposed amendments for, the categories are professional fees for building review and permits,
Right.
professional fees legal,
Legal,
street cleaning,
Yeah.
and leaf bags.
yes.
So what I included was a spreadsheet which shows
Right.
what was budgeted for the year in each of those categories, what we spent to date, July through December 15th, or, I'm sorry, December 2015, and my best estimate of what we will probably spend to the end of the
Right.
fiscal year. So you all need to do an amendment now before you overspend.
Yes.
So then the last column on the right is the proposed budget amendment to get us to July 1st.
And Tori did a good job of providing the estimates, in here, which I think again should go up on the website as well. But these are all things that we expected.
Yes.
We have been talking about them for the past meetings. Having a new building administrator, there was going to take some time to get him up to speed, and then we had a variance, which is an expensive thing to do, a variance hearing process. Doing our ordinance amendments.
And revising the applications, permits.
Yeah, right. All of those things take time for both the building administrator and our attorney. Having Rolling Acres come in and do the street cleanings and the catchment basins that they have done 2 times in the fall and 2 times in the spring. It's just an additional service that we have taken on, and so it's not surprising that we're getting more service, we're paying for more service. The one heartbreaker for all of us I know is the leaf bags. Next year, Target. We are ready, we'll be ready to go in early fall, Target free delivery. So does anybody, I wanted to make sure that everybody knew the history on those amendments.
Okay, so we need 4 separate amendments?
Can we do one amendment?
Or just one amendment includes all?
You can have a motion to include all amendments.
Okay. I will move, can I do that? I can move to budget amendment to include the building review and permitting fees, legal fees, leaf bags, and street cleaning, and the amount specified by the village manager.
Second.
That suffice, Council? That suffices?
Yeah, that was very thorough. I second that motion.
Good. Yo.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passed. So we're legal as far as spending money. Good. Thank you. And what else? Oh, data protection. Wow, who put that together?
I didn't actually put it together yet. I'm just going to propose that suggest that we do need to undertake to draft a policy and adopt it in order to be compliant with state law that requires that, as I understand it, it requires a reasonable, secure procedure be in place for keeping confidential any data that's collected on employees or council members or contractors.
Or residents.
Or residents. Any data that's collected that's personal information.
Did this come from a document, a prototype document?
Yes, I think so. Beth, what was the prototype for this?
Yeah, so I found a prototype online. I don't remember exactly which state agency it was, but I basically used their language and tried to adapt it for our purposes.
Okay, good, boy.
Simplify some of it.
This is, I started going through it over, page after page after page.
Well, it's probably too extensive. I think I wanted to make sure I had a broad start, and I think Tiffany already gave good comments, and then I think Ron, I didn't look.
You said you had some comments.
He has comments. So, I'll make the changes as needed.
Good.
So I think for the record, we should say that we're not going to introduce the data protection policy. We're going to discuss that it is required by the state that we have this.
Right.
We are working to be in compliance.
And we'll attempt to have a draft ready by
I think we should be able to have something by the next meeting.
Good, thank you. Yeah, thank you. A lot of work went into this. And we're about a year late in doing it, aren't we?
Yes.
We've been diligently working towards this goal.
Right. Okay, moving on. Manager's report.
All right. I sent you all the draft of this, so I don't know if you want to go through this line, but so first of all, Beth is going to be serving as acting village manager, and we've been going over bill processing, building permit applications, training Beth and everything, so I hope it will go smoothly. Income taxes. I wanted to tell you all about a meeting I attended with other village managers, Montgomery County, and the Comptroller's office last Friday, because it appears that the Maryland Comptroller has made a mistake in how it's allocated income tax returns among jurisdictions. So now, at least 2 jurisdictions owe a total of $15 million to Montgomery County in refunds. And so most of the meeting was to discuss how that happened, what they're going to do to fix it, and what our risk is, all the different villages. The Comptroller's Office has already undertaken an audit, which will go back to 2010 to review it. But in broad strokes, what is our risk as the Village of Martin's Additions that there has been a similar error? The Comptroller's Office said that statewide, the average number of returns per household is 1.3. So since we have 325 households, we would expect, based on the statewide average, something like 422 returns per year. We actually have always had less than that. We've always had, I went back 10 years on the income tax summary reports, which are done by the state, and compiled it, and let me just pull it up. I don't think we've ever exceeded.
Like 375.
Our high was 385.
Yeah.
And currently we're more like 350. So I think our risk is low. In fact, there might even be a possibility that we are owed a refund because maybe some income tax returns have been credited to either the county or a neighboring jurisdiction. But in any case, for planning the next year's budget, I would say to neither assume a risk of loss or a refund.
What are the next steps for the Comptroller's Office?
Well, the Comptroller's Office, one of the big issues among all the village managers is why can't you just send us a list of the addresses and we will verify it? And they told us that they cannot for confidentiality reasons. They can report bands of information, but they can't even report that if there's fewer than 30 returns in a band. In other words, they could say you have the income tax levels of between this amount and this amount can be reported in bands, but so long as there's at least 30.
In other words, the addresses of all of the villages?
No. They can't give us anything.
Everybody together.
They can't. So they have to do it, and we have to trust them that they're doing it. Now, the way the Comptroller's Office said it's likely that its residents are at fault for some of this. For example, a lot of condos were built in Chevy Chase. And those new residents fill out their income tax return and they're asked to say, well, their address is Chevy Chase, 20815, and then they're asked to designate their jurisdiction, and one of the options is Town of Chevy Chase. So they think maybe they are, they're not quite sure, and they check it off. There's no way for the Comptroller's Office to know they're not. And so over the years, well,
attorneys like
manually they could theoretically they could be pulled manually and checked.
But I was shocked that they don't have an automated address system.
They do not. They do not.
This is like Pepco. The level of.
So they're looking at developing a system in the future that will automate it, but they don't have that in place now. So it requires, the audit will help identify this. This is why it's important for residents when they fill out their own income tax return to check Village of Martin's Additions as their jurisdiction.
You know, we were told about 3 or 4 years ago, you don't have to do that anymore, it's all automated. Yeah. But apparently it's not.
Yeah, and I don't know.
Yeah, so that definitely bears repeating.
Yeah,
It's going to be on the website and in a newsletter.
Yeah.
And in past years, it's been in the newsletter.
Right.
Annually, yeah.
So.
But even so, people don't always pay attention, I think.
Okay.
So this sort of overlaps with the Supreme Court Wynn case because they circulated estimates to all the village managers of what our likely risk is in terms of having to refund money based on the Wynn decision. And I can't give you the details of that because it's confidential, but my best estimate, were we to budget conservatively, would be about $150,000, which is spread over 9 years.
We
may owe that amount over a 9-year period.
Correct.
So That
That's a
information could be
conservative-
provided off the record to the council, so
No.
we have a better understanding of.
Well,
No, I can't, actually. Well, I was instructed. I can't. I can
But,
explain
yeah,
a
I
little
have-
bit more about where I got that number.
that, yeah.
They have pretty firm data for 2006 through 2011. The numbers vary quite a bit between 2006 and 2011. In fact, there isn't even a claim in every single year. Okay? Then the years that are still in flux primarily are 2012, 2013, and 2014. So if we take what we know for sure, that's about $75,000. That represents 17% of
They
what-
have now told us for those years it's $75,000.
Approximately, yes.
Okay.
Now, but because 2012, 2013, and 2014 are still in flux, in order to budget conservatively, we would take the highest year of the ones we know before, say in our case it's about 2009, and assume that number for 2012, 2013, and 2014.
That's very conservative.
That's very conservative. And that
Because the
gets-
markets, all that high point was all the capital gains coming in.
Yeah, this is very conservative, I'm
And
just
so
saying.
those capital gains turned into losses in later years.
And that gets you to about 150,000.
Yeah.
And the one caveat to this is that when you have a small municipality like this, the averages don't always hold up
That's
so
right. There
well.
could be one person.
Yes. They went on to say that statewide, 2% of the income tax returns represent 25% of income tax revenue.
Yeah.
That's shocking.
Yes. That's why one or two income tax returns in your jurisdiction can turn all these estimates on their head.
Thank you.
Right. Good. Anything else?
All right, we have a contract for lawn and landscaping
Right.
with Abraham's Lawn Service. They
Do
signed.
both Ron and Dan have a copy of that?
No, Tim brought it this afternoon, so no, not yet, but I'll provide that. The budget amendments, records retention policy, I emailed you all about this. We're on our third version, but I think
Right.
we're,
Putting you
I
there.
anticipate having that done before you.
yes. Devin
Not in a death
Devin
way.
did an amazing job in August of doing all the DGGS 440 forms for every single category, but I have to revise every single one of them for the
things that they had us fix.
But also because now it's 2016,
Yeah.
and so all the numbers for years have to be revised, and
Okay.
we're there. We're almost there.
All right, good.
Okay, data protection, we talked about it, website, we've done some continuing revisions, I think that we talked about that. Safety. I emailed you all about the redesign of the Brookville Road and Taylor Street
Yes.
intersection. This is really, the police officers are shocked, by the way, that State Highway is actually doing
Oh.
this change. They're thrilled. They were very pessimistic. They'll never do it.
I know.
I said, no, they really are. They're coming. And the police officers will attend that meeting.
I would like to, if we can, and Beth, depending on when this actually gets scheduled, obviously as much lead time as possible, but publicizing that they're coming so that the residents that have expressed concerns about this
Yeah.
are able to attend. Whether or not they're able to participate is, depends on how the meeting is set up and what State Highway sets as restrictions, but at least.
We may have limited control over whether they come in the day or the evening.
If possible, I would suggest an evening.
Of course. But
Again,
it may not be possible.
That's right.
We might not, yeah, that's
But I've had meetings with them at other places, it's all during the day.
right,
Yeah.
because they can.
But we hopefully can have the drawings available for people to come and review them here later. WSSC is virtually done on Bradley and Melville, but it's on hold because of the extreme cold. So
Can
they
I
won't
ask
actually
if
convert
the
over.
porta potty could be removed from the end of Bradley since there's no work being done?
Should be. It's a good request.
That's a parochial resident request right there.
There's been a recurring water main break over on Summit, which is actually outside our jurisdiction but affected our residents. But hopefully that got resolved. Preparing for the snowstorm. We had our first one. Surprise, surprise, last night.
And were they out, did they put out sand or salt or anything?
Well,
Or no?
so, no, we didn't.
It wasn't that
John
much
Hyman
snow.
and I texted each other
Yeah.
at about 8:30, and I checked the weather, and we decided it was best to do it early in the morning, and then I left the restaurant at 10 p.m. and it's Armageddon out there.
I think a lot of jurisdictions were surprised by that.
Yeah.
But we made our best guess.
Okay, sure.
Based on the weather report, and
The roads were completely clear
they
here.
were, so he did
This
it
morning.
early in the morning.
Good.
All the roads had been treated by 7:15.
Oh, great, great.
I saw him out there
Yeah.
as I was dog walking.
We're in high preparation for the impending blizzard. So Wayne has strategically found every place that needs a sign so that
Right.
the snowplows can make the
Right.
turns, so that the snowplows have a place to pile up the snow. And he's out there
We'll
probably
see,
doing it.
we'll
as
see
we
how
speak.
much people adhere to that.
Yeah. We did have resident inquiries about resuming the practice of having the village subsidize or cover the cost of clearing walkways for
Right.
the elderly or the infirm. And so that's a discussion out there. We already do it for Brookville Road because of the county plows cover up the sidewalks there, but we aren't doing it right now for anything else.
Question kept coming up whether the costs have come down for that. Because the last time it was done, it was $80,000 just for the sidewalks. The sidewalks were much more than the roads.
For a few residents, it wasn't all residents. So.
So it was expensive. It used to be expensive. I don't know if those costs may have come down.
So the sidewalk and curb repair?
Okay, so we started to talk about this at the last council meeting where we
Right.
got two estimates, and so now the Pavement Corporation is scheduled to do it on January 28th, this sort of short list of repairs, and we'll see how it goes with this company. They were half the price of Chamberlain. Yeah, so I think it's worth giving them a try and see.
What were their references like?
Well, professional and, so. And the specifications of what they're doing are similar or the same as Chamberlain, so, I think in the end, we'll just have to give it a shot and see.
What they're good references. Are we putting out, is there going to be a note to the community about this is coming and here are the locations that you'll have to avoid kind of thing?
Yes, they say they can do it all in one day, so I don't think there should be a lot of disruption.
Okay.
Because but yes.
Okay.
I actually am skeptical that it's going to happen on the 28th, because if there's snow on the ground, they can't do it. And if it's extreme cold, they also probably can't do it, so that's optimistic, but...
In the meantime, we probably need to get some sort of marker on the one on Melville.
There was one. Did it go away again?
I think WSSC may have taken it back,
for theirs.
It's gone anyway. Can I just...
Of course, yes.
I'll be happy to put one there.
Yeah, Wayne brought a cone and put it there.
Okay.
WSSC must have thought it was their cone and took it away again.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Because it was great while it lasted.
Trees in the public right-of-way. So to answer, we're done for the fall of 2015 work, which include plantings, removals, stump grinding, a biennial fertilization, so there won't be any fertilization done in 2016. And to answer a resident's question, we are using, the arborist uses Davy Arbor Green, which is a liquid fertilizer, and it's a slow release, so it's going to provide 2 years of nutrients.
And that was an organic fertilizer, correct?
I believe that is what he said. Street cleaning and catchment basin cleaning is done for the fall. We've not scheduled it for the spring yet. Bulk trash happened on January 9th. Next one is March 12th. And on the building administration report, which is tab 10, I think I would there's not a lot to report here, except that I would report that there has been a lot of activity in the last 24 hours at 3505 Raymond Street. Since we wrote this, we've issued a dumpster permit, a demolition permit, and they are continuing to discuss with Doug Lohmeyer how they might need to revise their drawings because of the established building line at their house is going to preclude a front porch, most likely. Or anyway, a front porch as they had initially proposed it.
Okay.
So that's
for next time.
It's been a little bit of excitement, but
Right.
I think it's resolving itself.
Something we'll have to consider. Okay, now Ron has given me this Comcast we need an ordinance granting non-exclusive franchise for Comcast cable television system.
Yeah, this is the ordinance that was introduced last month. The county council has not yet approved the franchise agreement. We don't know exactly when that approval will take effect. It has been recommended by the executive and staff. I would expect the county council to approve it as well. Our ordinance would not take effect unless and until the county council approves the franchise agreement. The reason we're doing it contemporaneously is because we have a 50-day time period basically to approve an ordinance unless we declare it an emergency, but then an emergency ordinance is only effective for a certain period of time and we got to re-up. So we're just making sure that we're on the same prospective timeline as the county by adopting it now.
So we've already had one reading of it last month. So this would be to adopt.
Correct.
So I will move that we adopt resolution number, we don't have a number on it, introduced December 17th.
So it'll be 11-16-1. 11-6, no, I'm sorry. 11-15-2.
Right.
No, I'm sorry. It was introduced in December. 12.
Oh, we're in January, aren't we?
12-15-1. 12-15-1 is the number, I'm sorry.
12-15-1. Okay. We will introduce resolution 12-15-1, not reintroduce it for second reading.
Right, and ask if there's any public comments.
Right. That authorizes a franchise agreement with Comcast, pending approval by Montgomery County.
Right.
Do we have any public comment or question?
Just everybody be safe.
Lace up your boots.
Hunker down.
Okay. So we have introduced it. We have to second it?
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt. I will move to adopt.
Second.
Aye.
Okay.
Right.
Seconded and approved.
Thank you.
Does it have to be signed?
Not yet. No, I'll gotta fill in those blanks.
Okay.
Thank
Good.
you very much.
Okay, and with that, we can bring the meeting to an end. And so at 9:25 on January 21st, the meeting adjourns.
When's the snow gonna start?